What do you think is holding it back right now when you think about ATAI and a lot of the investments that you've made?
So I actually think the psychedelic space is not going not well at all, or positively said, it's going really well. But I know where your question is coming from. Sort of, if you look at the share prices, for example, of ATAI and COMPASS, the two companies, psychedelic companies I founded, they are kind of at all-time low. But the reason is that the biotech industry as a whole has nothing to do with psychedelics, is in a very, very bad shape, at least on the stock market. I don't think the companies, it's very important, the companies are not in a bad shape. It's really like the state of like the capital markets around biotech, which the reason is fairly simple, still very devastating. So biotech stocks are the most interest rate sensitive stocks at all. Why? Because most biotech companies do science, do all the FDA studies, and then when they get an approval, and then they get revenue. So if you look at the way companies are usually valued, like discounted cash flow, you have sort of spending, and somewhere in the future, you then have massive cash flows. But because the cash flows are sometimes far, sometimes near, but are in the future, any form or any interest rate change, which then sort of changes the discount rate you're applying, sort of makes biotech stocks especially sensitive, or the valuations, to any change in interest rates. So what was clear when interest rates went up because of inflation, it was clear that biotech stocks had to go down. But not as much as they did by far. But what has happened is, because they came from a generational high after COVID, so we had this boom phase in biotech, and then this shock moment when interest rates shot up, is that there was too much pressure on the system. And actually, what people are not aware of, sort of the specialized buyers base for biotech stock is actually very small. There are maybe some 100 specialized life science funds, while there are thousands and thousands of tech funds. Yeah, and just the pressure on the system was too much. These funds had outflows, whatever. So actually biotech and biotech stocks, listed ones, went into kind of this death spiral. I think we're finding the bottom now. And I personally believe, like sort of not financial advice, but I personally believe that biotech is the last sort of sector which hasn't recovered. If you look at there were other sectors who went through a similar shock. Bitcoin went down to whatever, 16,000, but now it's at 100. And I deeply, deeply believe, simplified said, biotech will have a similar steep rebound, but it's the one sector which hasn't recovered yet from the post-COVID, post-inflation, interest rate spike shock. So, but that is true for all the biotech companies. So if you look at the average small and mid-sized biotech company, it went down 80-90%. So did ATAI and so did COMPASS. But it doesn't say anything about the state of the psychedelic industry, if at all, by the way. And for ATAI, I can say it because I'm the chairman. Yeah, obviously it's my company. So with all the disclaimer that I'm super biased and obviously super passionate about my own company, but I think it's one of the biggest investment opportunities out there, because we're trading almost at cash. We have 7 late-stage drugs, meaning which are close to approval in mental health. All or most of them are based on our psychedelic drugs, which means, by the way, I think the risk that they're not working is very, very low, because we know they're working. We just need to prove it now in a very scientific, very gold standard way. But it's not a novel drug where we could discover it doesn't work. No, we do know psychedelics work. I would dare to say that very bluntly in that way, which for me, again, with all the bias that it's my company, makes ATAI one of the most compelling investment opportunities out there. But side note, but again, it's going really, really well.
Yeah. Lars Walder, your co-founder at ATAI, was telling me about, we're going deep on psychedelics, but he was also telling me about the success of, is it J&J, who have ketamine process that they were able to...
Yes, that is maybe another... So I think what I just said, like that sort of biotech in general is in a very bad state, is the main reason why, again, why most biotech stocks, in fact, but also and especially ATAI and COMPASS trade so low. Maybe I should add why, because like when an industry like the biotech industry is in such a big distress, then people don't like novelty. So, and I would argue actually now that psychedelics in a certain way are the most risk minimized thing you can buy. Because again, I would say we do know scientifically that psychedelics works. And again, there's always an execution risk, by the way. What could happen, which I don't think will happen, but like that my colleagues at ATAI, we make mistakes in trial design, whatever. So there is an execution risk. So it's very important to say a drug can work and you still can mess up the execution. But if hopefully people assume now that we don't do that, that we know what we're doing, I think psychedelics in general, and especially ATAI and COMPASS, are very sort of risk-reduced. However, that is not the perception people have at the moment about psychedelics in general, because they think, oh, this is novel and fancy. And in very dire times, people do not like novelty. When things go really well, people love novelty. When sectors go not very well, like biotech at the moment, then people don't like novelty. So that is, I think, the biggest burden. The second big burden on psychedelic stocks is indeed, but I think it's going to turn now and become our biggest driver, is the success Spravato has now, but how long it took to get there. So Spravato, for the ones who don't know, is a product of J&J, and it's actually a novel version of ketamine. And ketamine, or in this case S-ketamine, is a very rapid acting antidepressant. So it's not, I would not say, I always say this is like, for layman's term, ketamine is a semi-psychedelic. So it doesn't give you that very deep experience. That's why it's a quick fix, but it's not a full fix. So I would always tell people the real deals are all the psychedelics ATAI and COMPASS are developing. But for the sake now, it's close to psychedelic, semi-psychedelic. And unfortunately, at the beginning, J&J or Spravato didn't look like a big success at all. But there was a reason. They were the first one, and I would say in pioneers take the arrows, and the settlers take the land. So they had to do all the groundwork with the doctors and the therapists of rolling it out. And then additionally, again, I don't want to criticize J&J at all, but what I know from when I talked to the execs there, they didn't really know what they have. Like in terms of J&J is more like, what are they doing? Like they're doing cancer drugs and all of them. And suddenly in their big portfolio of J&J, they had this one semi-psychedelic, which was a little bit different. And I think they just didn't know how to sort of roll it out, and third, it was a different time. Again, we sitting here now in 2025, like people talk about psychedelics in a very open, in a very positive way. I would say psychedelics have arrived now in society and people are eagerly waiting for ATAI and COMPASS to be successful. But in 2019, when I think the issue was approved 2019, this was not the case. So again, short version, J&J had to do much more groundwork. And I think at the beginning, at least, they didn't really know how to do that. And that made Spravato start really slow. But now the revenues are exploding. And now people are like, yes, now we understand it. Now we understand the true potential of Spravato and of ketamine. And now it's actually more than $1 billion revenue drug, which is called a blockbuster drug, and growing and growing. And I think it's going to be a 5 billion plus revenue drug soon. So investors now think, okay, that's the same what's going to happen to ATAI and COMPASS. They're going to get, by the way, nobody out there I have ever met believes that the psychedelics ATAI and COMPASS are developing will not get approved. Every investor I talk to is like, no, you're going to get it to approval. But then look at Spravato. It will take you some years more till you really make big revenues. And I was like, no, because we know how to do that. Also, we learn from the mistakes of Spravato, but even more important, now the therapists out there already know how to use that stuff because they're using Spravato, and we practically going into that sort of, into that infrastructure, which nicely J&J laid out for us. So I deeply believe once COMPASS and then ATAI have approved drug, we're going to see they're going to be really multi-bestseller from day one.
Thanks for watching this Beyond Tomorrow clip. If you haven't subscribed yet to our main channel, join us there for conversations that can help you thrive today and flourish tomorrow. We'll see you next time.